saving an Apache woman from drowning by sacred law. Her tribe claims she belongs to him. Ethan had been traveling for several days through the wilderness, moving slowly along the riverbank. The sun was high, and its warm light reflected off the water, making the river sparkle like 1,000 tiny stars. The air was fresh and filled with the smell of wet earth and growing plants. Birds sang in the trees, and the soft rustle of leaves made the whole forest seem alive. Ethan loved these quiet moments, when the world seemed to pause and he could think without interruption. He had been exploring this area for weeks, looking for a place where he could rest and maybe even find a little adventure. But nothing in his past had prepared him for what he was about to witness. Suddenly, a scream broke the peaceful sounds of the forest. It was sharp and urgent, filled with fear. Ethan froze. The sound came from somewhere down the river, where the water flowed faster and rocks jutted out unpredictably. He strained his eyes and saw movement. At first, he thought it might be a deer caught in the current, but then he realized it was human. A young woman was struggling in the river, her dark hair plastered to her face, her arms flailing as she fought against the strong current. She was small, but the river was strong, dragging her down. Panic surged in Ethan's chest. He knew he had to act fast. Without thinking twice, Ethan ran to the edge of the river, kicking off his boots and shedding his jacket. He jumped into the cold water. The current immediately tried to pull him along, but he fought against it, swimming toward the woman. Every stroke was a battle, but he could see her face now, twisted in fear, and he felt a surge of determination. "I've got you," he shouted, even though he wasn't sure if she could hear him over the roar of the river. The water slammed against him, but he pushed forward, finally reaching her. Ethan grabbed her arm and held on tight. She fought against him at first, thrashing instinctively, but he could feel her strength fading. "It's okay." "I won't let go," he shouted, pulling with all his might. Slowly, inch by inch, they moved toward the calmer water near the shore. His muscles ached and his lungs burned, but he refused to stop. Finally, with one last effort, he managed to drag her out of the water onto the muddy riverbank. They both lay there for a moment, gasping for air, covered in mud and soaked from head to toe. Ethan looked at her closely for the first time. She was young, perhaps in her early 20s, with dark, piercing eyes and long black hair that clung to her face. Her clothes were simple, likely handmade, and they were now wet and torn from the river. She shivered violently, and Ethan quickly took off his jacket, wrapping it around her shoulders. "You're safe now," he said softly. "You're safe." The woman looked at him warily, her eyes wide and alert. She didn't speak at first, only trembling as she tried to regain her composure. Ethan noticed bruises on her arms and scratches along her legs, likely from the rocks in the river. He helped her sit up and checked for serious injuries. Aside from being cold and exhausted, she seemed mostly unharmed. Ethan dug through his small bag and found a piece of bread and some water, offering it to her. Hesitantly, she accepted, her hands shaking as she took the food. As she ate, Ethan spoke gently. "Do you know how far you drifted? You could have been carried miles downriver. I'm glad I found you when I did." The woman didn't respond, only staring at him quietly. Ethan realized she might not speak his language, or perhaps she was too shocked to respond. He decided to give her time, sitting beside her and keeping a watchful eye on the river. After a while, the woman finally spoke, her voice soft but clear. It was a language Ethan didn't understand. He listened carefully, trying to catch any words he might recognize, but it was foreign to him. She pointed at herself, then at him, repeating the gesture. Ethan nodded slowly, understanding that she was trying to communicate something important. He smiled gently. "I saved you," he said simply, hoping she would understand. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. It was the first sign of trust he had seen from her since he rescued her. The sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the riverbank. Ethan knew they couldn't stay there for long. The forest could be dangerous at night, and the river was no place for anyone to camp. He stood, offering his hand to help her up. She took it cautiously, pulling herself to her feet. Together, they moved a little away from the river, finding a flat patch of ground where they could rest. Ethan built a small fire, using dry wood he had collected along the bank. The warmth and light seemed to comfort the woman, and she finally relaxed a little, sitting near the flames and wrapping herself more securely in his jacket. Ethan watched her closely, noticing small details. She had a quiet dignity about her, even after the terrifying experience. There was intelligence in her eyes and a quiet strength that told him she had survived hardships before. He wondered how she had ended up in the river in the first place. Perhaps she had been gathering food, or maybe she had fallen while traveling along the riverbank. Ethan didn't ask immediately. He wanted her to feel safe first. As night fell, the sounds of the forest changed. Crickets chirped, owls called to one another, and the river's water continued to rush relentlessly. Ethan kept the fire burning, scanning the forest for any signs of danger. He knew that alone in this wilderness, they were vulnerable. Yet, as he glanced at the young woman, he felt a sense of responsibility stronger than anything he had ever felt before. She was safe because of him, and he would do everything he could to keep it that way. Eventually, the woman spoke again, this time pointing to the river, then to herself, and finally to Ethan. He nodded, understanding that she was referring to the moment he saved her. He smiled softly. "Yes," he said, "I saved you. That's what matters." She studied him quietly, her expression unreadable, and then, slowly, a faint smile appeared. It was small, but it was genuine. For the first time since the river, Ethan felt a connection forming, a silent understanding between them. Hours passed and the cold night pressed closer. Ethan shared some more food and water, encouraging the woman to eat. She gradually relaxed, leaning against him for warmth. There was no need for words. The fire, the warmth, and the quiet of the night were enough. Ethan realized that sometimes actions spoke louder than language. The bond formed in that moment was built on trust and the understanding that they had faced danger together. As the night grew darker, Ethan thought about what the next day might bring. He knew he couldn't stay by the river forever, and he also knew that the woman's life might be connected to a larger world he didn't yet understand. But for now, all that mattered was keeping her safe. He covered them both with extra blankets and stayed awake for a while, listening to the river, ensuring that she remained unharmed. By the first light of dawn, the woman stirred, stretching her arms and blinking sleep from her eyes. Ethan smiled, offering her more food and water. She accepted, and this time she spoke a few words in her language while pointing at the river and then at Ethan. Though he couldn't understand them fully, the tone was one of gratitude. Ethan nodded, understanding without needing words. He had saved her and she knew it. Little did Ethan know, the act of saving her would bring consequences he had never imagined. By saving her life, he had stepped into a world of customs and laws far different from his own. The bond formed in the river was only the beginning of a journey that would test his courage, his understanding, and his respect for a people and their traditions he had never known. But at this moment, all was quiet and the young woman was safe. And sometimes, that was enough. The river flowed gently now, carrying away the night's danger, and Ethan sat beside her, watching the sunrise. A new day had begun, and with it, a story that was only just starting to unfold. The morning sun was warm and golden as Ethan and the young woman, Nayeli, sat beside the river, still recovering from the events of the previous day. The fire from last night had burned down to glowing embers, and the gentle sound of the river created a quiet rhythm around them. Nayeli was calmer now, though her eyes constantly scanned the surrounding forest, as if she expected danger to appear at any moment. Ethan offered her some bread and water again, which she accepted more readily this time. It seemed that small acts of care had begun to ease her fear. but their quiet mourning was suddenly interrupted by movement at the edge of the forest. Shadows shifted between the trees, and then, emerging from the brush, came several figures, dressed in traditional clothing that gleamed with intricate patterns of beads and leather. Their faces were serious and commanding. Naeli's body stiffened, and she whispered a word in her language that Ethan didn't understand. He took a step forward instinctively, placing himself slightly in front of her, unsure what these new people might want. One of the figures, a tall man with a dignified presence, stepped forward. He spoke in a firm voice, his words unknown to Ethan, but the tone was clear. He was a leader and elder. Naeli immediately knelt before him, her posture showing respect and submission. Ethan watched, fascinated but also confused. He had only acted to save her life, yet it was clear that her tribe had rules and traditions he did not yet understand. The elder motioned toward Ethan, then back at Naeli, repeating gestures Ethan struggled to interpret. Naeli responded, speaking again in her language, pointing between Ethan and herself, and then to the river where she had been rescued. The elder nodded solemnly. Ethan realized slowly that this had something to do with the act of saving her. He had only wanted to help, but now it seemed there was a cultural meaning he had not considered. Naeli spoke a few more words to the elder and he replied, his expression serious. Then, to Ethan's surprise, he motioned for Ethan to come closer. Ethan approached cautiously, keeping an eye on the other members of the group, who watched silently. The elder gestured toward Ethan's hands and then to Naeli. Ethan hesitated, unsure what was being asked of him. Naeli stepped forward slightly, placing a hand on Ethan's arm, as if trying to help him understand. Finally, through a series of gestures and a few slow words, Ethan understood the truth. By saving Naeli's life, the tribe's sacred law declared that she now belonged to him, not in the sense of ownership as he had feared, but in the sense of responsibility. He was now entrusted with her safety and well-being, bound by their customs to protect her from harm. Ethan's mind raced. He had never heard of such a law, and it was foreign to everything he knew about right and wrong. Yet the seriousness in the elder's eyes and the reverence in Naeli's posture made it clear that this was not a suggestion. It was a rule he could not ignore. Ethan swallowed hard and nodded, trying to show respect. He realized that refusing would not only dishonor Naeli, but could also create tension between himself and her people. He looked at Naeli, who met his gaze with a mixture of relief and concern. She seemed to understand that this was a moment of transition, and though she did not fully know what lay ahead, she trusted him to honor the bond that now existed between them. The elder then led Naeli back a few steps and spoke again, pointing to Ethan, then to the sky, and finally to the river. Ethan sensed that this was a lesson, a reminder that nature, life, and honor were all connected. Naeli followed his instructions carefully, showing her obedience and respect for her traditions. Ethan realized that he needed to learn quickly if he was to navigate this new and unfamiliar world. After a period of silent communication, the elder finally motioned for them to follow him. They walked through the forest, the soft sounds of the river fading behind them. Naeli stayed close to Ethan, her hand brushing against his arm occasionally, a gesture of reassurance. The path led them to a small clearing where more members of the tribe had gathered. Some were older, their faces lined with experience and wisdom, while others were younger, watching the new arrival with curiosity and caution. Ethan could feel their eyes on him, studying him as though he were being measured not only for his intentions but for his character. He understood that this was a test of respect, courage, and patience. Naeli whispered a few words to him, telling him in her language that he must show that he meant no harm. Ethan nodded, determined to do what was right, even if it meant walking a path he had never imagined. The elder began a ritual of sorts, calling the tribe to gather around a small fire in the center of the clearing. Ethan watched carefully, noting the seriousness of the occasion. The fire was symbolic, a representation of life, warmth, and protection. The tribe members took turns speaking, gesturing toward Naeli and then toward Ethan. Though he could not understand the words, the meaning was clear. He was now linked to Naeli in a sacred way, and the tribe expected him to honor that bond fully. Over the next several hours, Ethan observed and learned. The tribe showed him small acts of trust, such as allowing him to sit near the fire, share in their food, and even assist in small tasks. Naeli explained in gestures and broken words that the law of the tribe was not meant to control, but to protect. By acknowledging Ethan's role, they were ensuring that Naeli would remain safe in a world that could be dangerous. Ethan began to understand the depth of the tribe's culture. It was a world where every action had meaning, where honor and respect were more important than possession or wealth. Naeli's eyes sparkled as she guided him through these lessons, showing him the paths in the forest, the plants that were safe to eat, and the rituals that marked the tribe's daily life. Ethan realized that saving her life had connected him to something much greater than himself, a culture rich with wisdom and values that he had never encountered. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, the elder approached Ethan once more. This time he placed a hand gently on Ethan's shoulder and nodded. Though no words were exchanged, the gesture spoke volumes. Ethan understood that he had been accepted, at least tentatively, into this circle of trust. Naeli looked at him, a faint smile on her lips, and he realized that their bond had begun to deepen. That night, Ethan and Naeli sat by the fire, sharing warmth and silence. The tribe had returned to their tents and homes for rest, leaving the clearing peaceful. Ethan reflected on the day's events. He had thought that saving a life was a simple act of kindness, but it had brought him into a world of rules and responsibilities he had never known. Yet, despite the challenges, he felt a sense of purpose stronger than anything he had experienced before. He had protected someone who was vulnerable, and in doing so, he had entered a story far larger than himself. Naeli leaned closer, speaking softly in her language, pointing toward the river, then to Ethan, and finally toward the stars above. Though he did not understand her words, the meaning was clear. She was expressing gratitude, trust, and hope. Ethan smiled, realizing that their connection had grown beyond words. In that quiet night beside the fire, two people from very different worlds had found a shared understanding, built on courage, respect, and care. The river flowed gently in the distance, carrying away the noise of the day and the fears of yesterday. Ethan watched its steady movement, thinking about what the future might hold. He knew that challenges would come, and that respecting the sacred law of the tribe would require patience, humility, and courage. But for now, he felt a deep sense of peace. Naeli was safe, and he had begun to understand the beauty and strength of the world she came from. As the night deepened, Ethan realized that saving a life had not been the end of his journey. It was only the beginning. He had entered a world where honor, respect, and tradition guided every action, and he was determined to navigate it with care. Naeli's presence reminded him that courage was not just about facing danger, but also about understanding, learning, and building trust. By the time the stars filled the sky, Ethan had made a silent promise to himself. He would honor the sacred law, protect Naeli, and learn everything he could about her world. And in doing so, he would grow not only as a traveler but as a human being, connected to a story much larger than his own. The fire flickered, the river whispered, and the night held a quiet promise of new beginnings, a promise that Ethan and Naeli would face together. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the forest, casting golden light across the clearing. Ethan awoke to the soft sounds of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. Naeli was already awake, moving quietly among the tents of her tribe. She was gathering small bundles of herbs and plants, her movements careful and deliberate. Ethan watched her, fascinated by the ease and confidence with which she moved. It was clear that she knew this land intimately, that she was part of it in a way he never could be. He rose from his blanket and stretched, feeling the cool morning air on his skin. The events of the previous day still lingered in his mind: the rescue, the tribe's arrival, and the declaration of responsibility under their sacred law. Ethan knew that his journey was only beginning. Saving Nayeli had brought him here, but understanding the world she came from and his place within it would be the true challenge. Nayeli noticed him watching and smiled briefly, offering him a small bundle of herbs. Ethan accepted it with a nod, grateful for her gesture. It was a silent communication, a way of saying that they were allies in this strange, unfamiliar world. He followed her movements carefully, trying to understand the significance of what she was doing. She explained in gestures, pointing to the herbs, to the fire, and to the river, showing him how they were used for medicine, cooking, and daily life. Ethan listened closely, eager to learn, realizing that knowledge of the land and its customs would be crucial if he was to navigate this new life successfully. As the morning progressed, Nayeli led Ethan to a small stream, where she began teaching him how to collect water safely. The river had been dangerous yesterday, but this smaller stream was calm and clear. Nayeli demonstrated the careful steps needed to filter and purify water using sand, small stones, and leaves. Ethan followed her instructions, making mistakes at first, spilling water or using the wrong leaves. Nayeli corrected him patiently, showing both determination and kindness. Slowly, Ethan began to grasp the techniques, realizing that even small actions in this environment required respect, attention, and care. By midday, other members of the tribe began to take notice of Ethan's efforts. They watched silently as he attempted tasks like lighting a fire without matches, weaving small baskets, and helping Nayeli prepare food. At first, there were whispers among the elders, questioning whether he could be trusted, whether he truly understood the responsibilities placed upon him. Ethan felt their eyes on him, measuring his every movement. The pressure was intense, but he refused to falter. Each task, no matter how small, was an opportunity to show respect and prove that he was willing to learn. Nayeli guided him through more complex lessons. She showed him how to track animals, identify edible plants, and even recognize subtle signs in the wind and sky that indicated weather changes. Ethan struggled at times, but Nayeli's encouragement kept him going. She spoke quietly, pointing and gesturing, and Ethan listened intently, realizing that communication in this world was not just about words. It was about observation, understanding, and connection. Slowly, he began to feel a bond with the land, the river, and the tribe that he had never imagined. As the day wore on, Ethan faced his first true test. Nayeli led him to a dense part of the forest where the terrain was uneven and the underbrush thick. She gestured for him to follow quietly, and he did, noticing that she moved with almost no sound at all. Suddenly, she stopped, crouching low. Ethan did the same, and through careful observation, he saw what had caused her to pause: a deer, grazing a short distance away. Nayeli explained in gestures that they were learning to observe without disturbing, to move carefully and respect the creatures of the forest. Ethan watched the deer, feeling a deep sense of humility. He realized that this way of life was not about dominance or control. It was about harmony, patience, and understanding. Later, Nayeli introduced Ethan to the art of building small shelters. She demonstrated how to use branches, leaves, and mud to construct temporary structures that could protect against rain and wind. Ethan worked alongside her, following each instruction carefully. He realized that every action required thought and respect, and that carelessness could have consequences, not just for him, but for Nayeli and the tribe. As they worked together, he began to understand the depth of her world, a world where knowledge, skill, and respect were passed down through generations, and where every task had purpose and meaning. By evening, Ethan had gained a newfound appreciation for the challenges Naeli faced daily. He had learned to navigate the forest more confidently, to read subtle signs in the environment, and to act with patience and care. Yet he also understood that there was much more to learn. The tribe's elders observed him closely, sometimes offering guidance, sometimes remaining silent, allowing him to discover lessons on his own. Each interaction was a test of character, a way of measuring his intentions and respect for their culture. As the sun began to set, Naeli took Ethan to a small hill overlooking the river. The sky was painted in shades of pink, orange, and gold, and the water below sparkled in the fading light. She gestured for him to sit, then pointed toward the river, the forest, and finally to herself. Ethan realized she was teaching him another lesson, one of reflection and observation. Life, she seemed to say, was about understanding one's place in the world and the connections between all living things. Ethan watched the river flow calmly, taking in the lesson silently. That night around the fire, the tribe gathered to share food and stories. Ethan listened closely, trying to understand the rhythm of their conversation and the lessons embedded within their words. Naeli translated some of the stories for him, explaining the significance of certain rituals and traditions. He learned about the importance of honor, loyalty, and courage, and how these values guided every action within the tribe. Ethan realized that respecting these values was not optional. It was essential if he was to maintain trust and harmony. Over the following days, Ethan's skills and understanding continued to grow. He practiced weaving baskets, tracking animals, identifying plants, and even simple forms of communication in Naeli's language. Each task, no matter how small, required patience, observation, and humility. Naeli was a patient teacher, correcting him gently when he made mistakes and praising him when he succeeded. Their bond strengthened with each passing day, built on mutual respect, trust, and shared experiences. Ethan also began to notice subtle shifts in the tribe's perception of him. At first, they had been cautious, their eyes skeptical. But as he demonstrated dedication, respect, and willingness to learn, they began to accept him as more than an outsider. They saw that he was not there to take or control, but to understand and protect. Naeli's presence was key to this acceptance, her trust in him signaling to the tribe that he was honorable and sincere. One afternoon, as Ethan helped Naeli gather firewood, she paused and looked toward the distant hills. She pointed, then gestured to Ethan and finally back at herself. Though he did not understand the words, the tone conveyed a sense of warning and caution. He realized that life in this world was filled with unseen dangers, wild animals, unstable terrain, and even human threats from outsiders who did not respect the land or its people. Ethan felt a renewed sense of responsibility. Naeli's safety depended on his awareness, vigilance, and respect for the rules of this world. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest, Ethan reflected on the lessons he had learned. The simple act of saving Naeli's life had brought him into a complex and beautiful world. He had discovered that courage was not only about facing physical danger, but also about understanding, patience, and humility. Trust, he realized, was earned through action, respect, and consistency. And the bond he shared with Naeli was growing stronger each day, built on shared experiences, mutual care, and understanding. That night, as Ethan lay beneath the stars, listening to the river's gentle flow, he thought about the challenges yet to come. He knew that learning the ways of the tribe would not be easy. There would be tests, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt. But he also knew that this journey was shaping him in ways he had never imagined. He had entered a world where every action had meaning, where respect and honor guided life, and where true courage came from humility and care for others. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling a sense of peace. Nayeli slept nearby, her presence a comforting reminder of the trust they had built. The forest was alive with nocturnal sounds, and the fire burned low, casting dancing shadows on the ground. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt that he truly belonged somewhere, not just in a place, but in a world of understanding, respect, and connection. As the night deepened, he made a silent promise to himself. He would continue to learn, to respect the sacred laws of the tribe, and to protect Nayeli with every ounce of his strength. The challenges ahead would test him in ways he could not yet foresee, but he was ready. The bond formed through courage and compassion had become the foundation of a journey that was only beginning, and Ethan knew that with patience, respect, and care, he could navigate the path before him. The forest slept around them, but Ethan's mind was awake, alive with thoughts of lessons learned, responsibilities accepted, and a growing connection with Nayeli. He realized that every day would be an opportunity to learn, to understand, and to prove that trust and respect could bridge even the widest gaps between worlds. And as the stars shone brightly above, he felt a quiet sense of hope, a hope that courage, compassion, and understanding could create a bond that would endure, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Days passed, and Ethan had begun to feel more at home among Nayeli and her tribe. He had learned to move quietly through the forest, to understand the signs of nature, and to respect the tribe's traditions. Nayeli guided him patiently, teaching him not only survival skills but also the deeper values of courage, honor, and respect. Yet, even as he grew more confident, Ethan sensed that life in this world was not always calm or forgiving. Danger could appear unexpectedly, and trust could be tested in ways he could not yet imagine. One afternoon, while helping Nayeli gather firewood, Ethan noticed figures moving at the edge of the forest. They were outsiders, men he did not recognize, their clothing different from anything the tribe wore. Their eyes scanned the area carefully, and one of them carried a rifle. Ethan immediately signaled to Nayeli, pointing toward the men and then back at the tribe. Nayeli's face tightened with concern. She whispered a word he did not understand, her tone urgent and tense. He realized that these men were a threat, and that he must act quickly to protect Nayeli and her people. He gestured for Nayeli to follow him quietly, and together they moved through the trees, staying low and using the forest's cover. Ethan's heart pounded as he observed the outsiders approaching the clearing. He could see that they were looking for something, or someone, and that their intentions were not friendly. Nayeli guided him silently, showing him small paths and hiding spots he would never have noticed on his own. Each step required care, each movement demanded attention. The survival skills she had taught him were now being tested in real life. As they watched from their hiding place, Ethan realized that the outsiders had noticed the tribe. One of the men shouted, pointing toward the tents, and others began to move closer. Nayeli's eyes widened in fear, and she tightened her grip on his arm. Ethan felt a surge of determination. He had promised to protect her, and that promise now meant more than ever. He signaled to her to stay quiet, and together they prepared to confront the situation. Ethan stepped forward cautiously, raising his hands to show he meant no harm, and shouted to the outsiders, "Stop! You're not welcome here." The men froze, startled to see him. They hesitated, unsure of what to do. Ethan could see the suspicion in their eyes, the sense that he was an obstacle to whatever they had planned. He knew that he had to act quickly and wisely. This was not a time for fear. It was a time for courage, for protection, and for careful thinking. Nayeli stepped beside him, standing tall despite the fear in her eyes. She gestured toward the outsiders, then toward the tribe, and finally toward Ethan. Her body language communicated trust and confidence. Ethan realized that the tribe's sacred law had given him a role he could not ignore. Protecting Nayeli and respecting her people was no longer optional. It was essential. The outsiders seemed to sense this authority, hesitating further as if recognizing that Ethan was not an ordinary traveler. The tension grew as the outsiders deliberated. One of them raised his hand, pointing a finger toward the clearing, then back at Ethan. Ethan interpreted the gesture as a threat. He stepped forward carefully, using his voice to maintain calm. "Leave now, or you will face consequences," he warned. His words were firm but not aggressive. Naeli nodded beside him, reinforcing his message with silent strength. The outsiders exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond to this unexpected resistance. Suddenly, one of the men moved closer, testing Ethan's resolve. Ethan planted his feet firmly and prepared to defend himself if necessary. Naeli reached for a small stick from the ground, holding it loosely as a symbol of readiness. The man paused, seeing their determination, and then slowly lowered his hand. The others followed, their expressions shifting from aggression to caution. After a tense moment, the leader of the outsiders motioned for the group to leave. Ethan watched carefully as they retreated, ensuring they did not turn back or attempt another attack. Once the outsiders had disappeared into the forest, Naeli exhaled in relief. She looked at Ethan, her eyes filled with gratitude and admiration. "You protected us," she said softly in her language, her tone conveying deep respect. Ethan nodded, understanding that this was more than just a physical victory. It was a demonstration of his commitment to her and the tribe, a proof that he was willing to honor the sacred law through action, not just words. The elders of the tribe emerged from their tents, having observed the confrontation from a safe distance. They approached Ethan and Naeli, their expressions solemn but approving. One elder placed a hand gently on Ethan's shoulder, signaling acceptance and acknowledgement. Ethan felt a mixture of pride and humility. He had acted out of necessity, but in doing so, he had earned the tribe's trust and respect in a tangible way. That evening, the tribe gathered around the fire, sharing stories of past challenges and the lessons learned from them. Naeli translated some of the words for Ethan, helping him understand the deeper meaning behind the elders' tales. He learned that the tribe had faced many threats over the years, outsiders seeking land, resources, or dominance. Their strength had always come from unity, courage, and respect for one another and the land. Ethan realized that he was now a part of this story, and that his actions had consequences beyond himself. Over the following days, tension remained in the air. The presence of outsiders nearby was a reminder that danger could strike at any moment. Ethan continued to work alongside Naeli and the tribe, learning their ways and earning their trust further. He practiced tracking, hunting, and gathering with careful attention, knowing that each skill could be essential for protection. Naeli guided him patiently, teaching him not only techniques but also the philosophy behind each action. Survival, she explained, was not only about strength or speed but about awareness, patience, and respect for all living things. As the days turned into a week, Ethan began to notice changes within the tribe. Some younger members who had initially been skeptical of him started to watch him with curiosity rather than suspicion. They observed his dedication, his willingness to learn, and his care for Naeli and the tribe. Slowly, he began to be seen not just as an outsider, but as someone who could be trusted, someone who had proven his commitment through deeds rather than words alone. However, not all challenges were external. A few members of the tribe questioned Ethan's intentions. They wondered if he truly understood the responsibilities placed upon him, or if he was merely trying to impress Naeli. These doubts created subtle tension, whispered conversations that reached Ethan's ears. He realized that gaining trust was a delicate process, requiring consistency, patience, and humility. He could not force respect. He had to earn it through every action, every decision, every choice he made. One afternoon, Naeli took Ethan to a secluded part of the forest to teach him about defensive strategies. She demonstrated how to set simple traps for small animals, how to use the terrain to one's advantage, and how to remain calm under pressure. Ethan practiced diligently, knowing that these skills were not only useful for survival, but also for protecting Nayeli and the tribe from potential threats. Nayeli watched him closely, offering guidance and correction, but also showing trust in his growing abilities. As the sun set, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, Ethan reflected on the challenges he had faced. He had confronted outsiders, earned a measure of trust from the tribe, and begun to understand the deeper values that guided their lives. Yet he knew that more challenges lay ahead. The bond between him and Nayeli, while strong, would be tested further by both internal doubts and external threats. He understood that courage was not a single act but a continuous effort, a commitment to protect, respect, and act with honor in every moment. That night, around the fire, the tribe shared a meal. Ethan participated fully, helping to prepare food and learning the rituals associated with eating together. He noticed the subtle ways in which respect was shown, how elders were honored, how each person contributed, how gratitude was expressed. These small acts reinforced the larger lessons he had learned, that trust, respect, and courage were intertwined, and that each action, no matter how minor, had significance in the larger web of life. Nayeli sat beside him, her presence a quiet reassurance. She pointed to the fire, then to Ethan, and finally toward the sky, as if communicating that courage was not only about facing danger but also about maintaining integrity, honoring tradition, and building understanding. Ethan nodded, absorbing the lesson deeply. He realized that his journey was no longer just about survival. It was about becoming a part of a living, breathing community and proving himself worthy of the trust placed in him. In the days that followed, Ethan faced additional challenges that tested his resolve. A sudden storm swept through the forest, forcing him and Nayeli to work quickly to secure shelters and protect the tribe's supplies. He learned to act decisively, to remain calm under pressure, and to rely on both his training and Nayeli's guidance. Each challenge strengthened the bond between them, and each success reinforced the lessons of courage, patience, and respect. Ethan understood now that the true test of his commitment was ongoing. It was not a single act, like saving Nayeli from the river, but a continuous effort to live according to the values of the tribe, to protect and honor those who trusted him, and to navigate a world filled with both seen and unseen dangers. And through it all, Nayeli remained a constant guide, teacher, and companion, helping him to grow, understand, and find his place in this new and challenging world. The days following the confrontation with the outsiders were calm, but the air still carried a sense of watchfulness. Ethan and Nayeli had settled into a quiet routine, moving through the forest and the riverbank with greater ease. Ethan had grown stronger, faster, and more confident in his ability to navigate the land, while Nayeli's guidance remained constant and patient. The trust between them had deepened into something more than friendship. It was a bond forged through courage, shared trials, and mutual respect. One morning, Ethan awoke to the soft sound of birdsong and the gentle rush of the river. Nayeli was already awake, kneeling near the water and gathering herbs. The forest was alive with the soft hum of life, and Ethan felt a deep sense of connection. He joined her quietly, helping to collect plants and observing the care with which she worked. Each plant had a purpose, each action a meaning, and Ethan now understood that every detail in this world mattered. As they worked, Nayeli spoke quietly in her language, pointing to the herbs and then to Ethan, teaching him names, uses, and the stories behind each plant. He listened intently, absorbing everything she shared. Slowly, he began to recognize the rhythm of the language, the way certain sounds carried meaning, and how gestures were just as important as words. By the end of the morning, Ethan felt a sense of accomplishment. He could gather herbs correctly, understand some of their significance, and even communicate simple thoughts to Nayeli without her needing to explain each step. After their work, Nayeli led Ethan to a high ridge overlooking the river. The view stretched for miles. The winding water glimmered under the sun, forests spread across the hills, and distant mountains touched the sky. Nayeli gestured toward the land, then to Ethan, and finally to herself. Ethan understood that she was teaching him a lesson about awareness, about seeing the bigger picture, not just the small details of survival. Life, she seemed to say, was connected. The river, the forest, the animals, and the people were all part of one living system. Ethan nodded silently, feeling the weight and truth of her words. That afternoon, the tribe gathered for a meeting. Ethan and Nayeli arrived as the sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the clearing. The elders spoke first, their voices solemn and commanding respect. Nayeli translated some of their words for Ethan, explaining that the tribe wanted to formally acknowledge him, not as an outsider, but as someone who had proven his dedication, respect, and courage. Ethan felt a mix of pride and humility. He knew that this recognition was earned, not given, and he resolved to continue living up to the trust placed in him. The elders explained that the sacred law under which he had saved Nayeli was more than a ritual. It was a bond of protection, responsibility, and honor. Ethan realized that his role was not just about guarding Nayeli from harm, but also about understanding and respecting the traditions of the tribe. Nayeli stood beside him, her hand brushing lightly against his arm, signaling both reassurance and connection. Ethan's heart swelled with gratitude. He understood that the bond they shared was now recognized by those whose guidance and wisdom mattered most. After the meeting, Ethan spent time with the younger members of the tribe. They asked him questions about his life before he arrived, curious about the world beyond the forest and river. Ethan answered openly, sharing stories of his travels, the challenges he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. The young members listened intently, inspired by his courage, honesty, and willingness to learn. Nayeli translated carefully, ensuring that every word conveyed both meaning and respect. By the end of the day, Ethan realized that he had not only gained the tribe's trust, but had also earned a place in their hearts. Over the following days, Ethan and Nayeli worked together to prepare the tribe for the changing seasons. They gathered food, strengthened shelters, and taught the younger members small survival skills. Ethan was careful to honor every tradition, every ritual, and every lesson that Nayeli shared. He understood that this was not simply work, it was a way of participating fully in the life of the tribe. Each action was a step toward harmony, respect, and understanding, and Ethan embraced it wholeheartedly. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Nayeli led Ethan to a quiet spot by the river. The water was calm, reflecting the golden light of the sky. She gestured for him to sit, then pointed to the river, the forest, and finally to herself. Ethan understood immediately. She was speaking about balance, about the delicate relationship between people and nature. They sat together in silence, listening to the soft sounds of the water, feeling a shared sense of peace. In that moment, Ethan realized that their bond had grown beyond rescue or duty. It was now a connection of trust, respect, and understanding that would endure no matter what challenges lay ahead. But life in the forest was not without its trials. One morning, scouts from a neighboring area arrived, bringing news of travelers who had entered Apache territory without permission. The tribe held a council to decide how to respond. Ethan watched as Nayeli and the elders spoke quietly, considering the options. Though he could not fully understand their language, he sensed the seriousness of the situation. Nayeli translated carefully for him, explaining that the tribe needed to maintain their safety while also upholding their traditions of respect and fairness. Ethan realized that his role now included wisdom as well as courage, and he listened closely, absorbing the guidance of those more experienced than him. The tribe decided to approach the travelers cautiously, offering communication and guidance rather than confrontation. Ethan accompanied Naeli, acting as both protector and mediator. Together, they met the outsiders at the edge of the forest. Ethan's calm demeanor and respectful posture helped set the tone. Naeli's knowledge and translation ensured that misunderstandings were minimized. By the end of the encounter, the outsiders understood the tribe's position and withdrew without incident. Ethan felt a quiet pride in his role. He had learned not only survival and courage, but also diplomacy, patience, and respect for cultural boundaries. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan's presence became a natural part of daily life. He and Naeli shared countless small moments, gathering herbs, fishing by the river, tracking animals, and preparing food. Each task, no matter how ordinary, carried meaning. Ethan's understanding of the tribe's way of life deepened with every passing day, and the bond between him and Naeli grew stronger. They communicated not only with words but through gestures, glances, and shared understanding. A quiet companionship had formed, built on mutual trust, respect, and shared experiences. One night, as the tribe celebrated a festival of gratitude for the river's bounty, Ethan observed the rituals with awe. He watched as dancers moved in rhythm, as elders offered thanks, and as every member of the tribe participated in harmony. Naeli stood beside him, pointing out the meanings behind each action. Ethan felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. He realized that saving Naeli from the river had brought him into this world, and that through respect, courage, and care, he had become part of something larger than himself, a community, a culture, and a story of trust and honor. The festival ended with quiet reflection. Ethan and Naeli sat by the river, the soft glow of embers illuminating their faces. Naeli spoke softly, pointing toward the stars, then to Ethan, and finally to the river. Ethan understood her words without needing translation. They were about the bond they shared, the journey they had undertaken, and the respect and trust that had grown between them. He reached for her hand, feeling the warmth and assurance of their connection. It was a silent promise that they would face the future together, with courage, respect, and understanding. As the night deepened, Ethan reflected on the journey he had traveled. He had come as a stranger, an outsider, with only a desire to help. He had faced danger, learned unfamiliar laws, gained the trust of Naeli and her tribe, and discovered a way of life rooted in honor, courage, and respect. He had grown stronger, wiser, and more understanding, not only because of the challenges he had faced, but because of the lessons he had embraced with humility and care. The next morning, Ethan and Naeli prepared for another day in the forest. They moved with quiet confidence, gathering food, checking traps, and observing the river. The bond between them was evident to anyone who watched. They moved in harmony, anticipating each other's actions, communicating through gestures and shared understanding. Ethan realized that the trust he had earned, both from Naeli and the tribe, was not permanent without continued care. Every day was a chance to prove his commitment, to honor the sacred law that had brought him here, and to continue growing as a protector, friend, and ally. Weeks passed, and life settled into a rhythm of learning, protection, and companionship. Ethan's skills had grown to match those of the tribe's younger members. His understanding of their traditions deepened, and his bond with Naeli remained strong. The river, once a place of danger and fear, now symbolized trust, courage, and the journey that had transformed both of their lives. Ethan knew that the lessons he had learned here would stay with him forever, shaping the man he had become. One quiet evening, Ethan and Naeli stood at the edge of the river, watching the water flow calmly. Naeli gestured toward the current, then to Ethan, and finally toward the forest. He understood without words. Their journey had begun with a single act of courage, rescuing a life from the river, and had grown into a story of trust, respect, and understanding that connected two worlds. They shared a quiet smile, knowing that together they had faced danger, learned patience, and built a bond that would endure. As the stars filled the sky, the forest seemed alive with possibility. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air on his face. He realized that saving Naeli had changed everything, not just her life, but his own. He had discovered courage in action, respect in understanding, and trust in the bonds that form when people face challenges together. Naeli stood beside him, her presence a comforting reminder of what they had shared, what they had learned, and the journey that lay ahead. In that moment, Ethan understood the true meaning of the sacred law. It was not about ownership, control, or obligation. It was about connection, responsibility, and honor. By saving Naeli, he had entered a world where respect and courage guided life, where every action carried meaning, and where the bonds between people could grow stronger than any danger or challenge. He knew that whatever the future held, he and Naeli would face it together, guided by the lessons of the river, the forest, and the trust they had built. The river flowed gently, reflecting the light of the stars. The forest slept around them, peaceful and calm. Ethan and Naeli stood side by side, ready for whatever came next, their hearts and minds connected through courage, trust, and understanding. And as the night held them in quiet serenity, Ethan felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been difficult, filled with tests of strength, patience, and respect. But it had also been beautiful, full of learning, growth, and the quiet power of trust. Together, they had faced the river, the forest, and the world beyond. And together, they would continue their journey with courage, honor, and understanding.